Should you take cruise line excursions? Yes or no? I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another of my cruising tips for travelers. I'm going to explore the arguments for and against taking the excursions offered by the cruise line. First of all, I want to talk about the main reasons for not doing a cruise line excursion. The first of these is as follows. Is going on a cruise line excursion going to maximize and be the most efficient use of your day in port? You don't get to choose what time the excursion that you're interested in goes. So you might find it falls often at 11 o'clock or it ruins the whole flow of the day. So actually your whole day in port is focused around going on that excursion where you might have 8 hours in port. So it's not the most efficient use of your time going on an excursion because you have no say. Secondly, what is the process for getting people out on excursions? Now, you'll find, particularly on bigger ships, it's very inefficient. You could be sitting around from the time you have to go, hand in your ticket and wait for the groups to get together. You could be waiting an hour or so before you even head off on your excursion. So it's a very inefficient use of your time. On smaller ships, you often just walk off and there's a small group and off you go. So one of the things that puts me off, particularly on bigger ships doing excursions, is just the whole process of getting off on the excursion. It's a very inefficient use of your time and you're sitting around for an hour or so in the theatre or wherever when you could be exploring the port. The third thing is ask yourself, how developed is the port? So particularly in the Caribbean and the Mediterranean, the ports are very developed and experienced at dealing with tourists. So there's lots of infrastructure to deal with people traveling by themselves or independently or looking for alternative excursions. So if you are in one of those regions like the Caribbean and the Mediterranean, and the ports are very popular cruise ports, don't feel worried that you're not going to find something to do at a reasonable price. So I always look at the ports and ask myself, how established is this port? If it's a port that very infrequently sees cruise ships, you may have a different perspective and a cruise line excursion may be more appealing. The fourth question to ask yourself is, how big is the group size? So you'll find on some of the bigger ships, particularly the value lines, you might have 40, 50 people on an excursion because they fill up the whole bus. On some of the more premium lines or the smaller lines like Oceania, you might have 20 people or so. So ask yourself, just how big is the group? And are you happy seeing the destination and going on an excursion with a big group of people and all the things that means in terms of the time it takes, moving people around, and just being with a big group? Linked to that is the fifth question I ask myself is, am I happy, whatever excursion I'm going on, to be driven by the slowest person in the group? Because the way that excursions work is whoever's the slowest, whether it's slow in terms of just timekeeping or whether it's just in terms of their physical ability to get around, the tour will have to adapt to whoever's the slowest person or the last back on the bus. Are you happy with the place you're going to do that? Now, you might find that sort of excursion, there's not a lot going on. It's mostly about sightseeing and you don't mind that you're going to be driven at that pace. The sixth thing I ask when I'm going or considering a cruise line excursion is the following. Based on what we're going to be doing on the excursion, am I happy that I'm not going to be able to stop and dwell and spend time on things I want to because I'm going to be moved along? You'll find on cruise line excursions, they try and pack as much in as possible. So if you come across something, it's a site, a painting, whatever, that you want to dwell, you might want to take some pictures or just sit and relax and watch it, you're not going to be able to do that. So often when I look at the excursions or the ports, I think, are there going to be things that I'm going to want to stop and look at because they're going to interest me more and not the whole group? So that's very important. Think about what you're going to be doing and are you going to want to spend time? Really important, particularly if you're taking photographs. Linked to that, of course, is also you can't speed up. If you're traveling by yourself and there's something that doesn't interest you, you can just move on and keep going. Skip something if it's not appealing, whereas you're going to have to stay as long as the group is allocated to look at something. The seventh thing I ask is just how much is included in the excursion. As I mentioned earlier, cruise line excursions tend to pack loads of things in because they want people to see as much as possible, and it can be very rushed. And the question I ask myself is, do I actually want to do as much as the excursion offers, or are there fewer things I want to see for longer? The eighth question, of course, is cost. Is it going to be cheaper to do it myself or with an independent provider? There are lots of independent providers who offer excursions that mirror the cruise line excursions, and it can often be cheaper. So the question, of course, is cost. Excursions can be a major on cost, and you can be spending $100 per person per day on average for an excursion. So it can mount up. So can you actually do it more efficiently by either doing it yourself or with an independent provider? Most people will focus on the cruise line offered short excursions for two key reasons. One, because it's really simple and easy because they're there. And secondly, a lot of people fret and worry about getting back to the ship on time And with the cruise line, they guarantee that the ship will always wait for their own excursions, no matter how late they are. If you go off and explore by yourself or an independent provider, there's always that risk they get you back too late or you get back too late. So how important is that in terms of timekeeping, or how comfortable are you just managing your own time and making sure you get back? There are two things that I use to guide me to decide if I am going to take a cruise line excursion. The first of those is complexity. Are we going to a place where there's lots of language issues or huge distances to travel, or culturally it's very difficult, or the actual excursion is very complicated because it involves helicopters and trains and getting to places and just huge complexity. So if the excursion I want to do is very complex, or the place I'm going to is complex, then I choose the cruise line excursion. So for example, when we were in Japan, I wanted to go to Kyoto from Osaka. It's quite far away. And also I knew that I would need a guide to show me around. So I went with the cruise line excursion. In Iceland, you travel huge distances, for example, on the Golden Circle, seeing all the key sites. Although you can get independent people to help you, it's an 8-hour tour. And I felt it was just safer to go with the cruise line because they would curate it and we'd have no issues getting back. Another example is when we were in Alaska, we wanted to go dog sleighing on a glacier. That was quite a complicated excursion because you had to get to the helicopter place, you had to go through all the check-ins with the helicopter, you had to go to the helicopter, come back, be picked up. It was quite a complicated and quite an expensive excursion. So I was much more comfortable letting the cruise line handle all of that complexity. So if the excursion looks very complex to me, very time intensive, then I would always go with the cruise line excursion. The second thing I do is again linked to that risk of missing the ship. If the ship is docking very far away from the place I want to explore, I'll often go on a cruise line excursion, even if it's one of those excursions where they basically take you from the ship to a place. So for example, in Taiwan, we docked really far away from Taipei, and there was a simple excursion which took you from the ship to a central meeting point. It left you there for a couple of hours to explore yourself, picked you up and took you back. So that's an example where I took it. I often in Rome will take the excursion which goes from the Civitavecchia port, which I think is how you pronounce it, I always get it wrong. It takes you into Rome just because it's so much easier and it reassures me. So any of those things where the ship is docking very far away from where I want to go, I'll often just take an excursion, and if possible, I take the one that just takes you there and I explore myself. Those then are my thoughts on taking cruise line excursions. If you find this helpful, why don't you watch another one of my many cruising tips for travelers right now.